Dust hung in the air of the small repair bay, catching the orange light of the setting sun through a cracked window. Arjun Reddy wiped grease from his hands with an old rag and stared at the broken drill machine in front of him. It had stopped working 3 times this week, and he was tired of fixing the same problem again and again. He was not a soldier. He was not a scientist. He was just a mechanic on a small mining outpost on the edge of human territory, far away from Earth, where life was quiet and mostly boring. The outpost was called Rest Point 7, a name given by tired workers who wanted a joke more than a real title. It was a cluster of metal domes built on a rocky moon, surrounded by machines that dug out minerals from the ground. Around 200 people lived and worked there. Most of them were like Arjun, ordinary people trying to earn a living in space because life on Earth had become too expensive and too crowded. That evening, something changed. A loud alarm rang through the domes, sharp and sudden. Arjun dropped his tools and ran outside with the others. In the sky, a streak of fire was falling fast, cutting through the darkening clouds. It was not a meteor. Meteors did not have metal wings. The object crashed a few kilometers from the outpost, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Commander Rohan Varma, the head of the outpost, ordered everyone to stay inside. But curiosity was stronger than orders for some people. Arjun was one of them. Later that night, when most of the outpost was asleep, Arjun took a small rover and drove out to the crash site. He told himself it was because he wanted to see if there was anything useful to fix or reuse. In truth, he just wanted to see something new for once in his boring life. The wreckage was strange. It was not shaped like any human ship. It was long and curved, almost like the body of a giant snake, with dark scales instead of metal plates. Smoke rose from a broken section near the front. Arjun walked closer, his flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. Inside the broken hull, he found a small chamber that had survived the crash. In the center of it sat a crystal, glowing faintly with a blue light. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before, not glass, not metal, but something in between. Without thinking clearly, he reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, a sharp pain shot through his skull. It felt like lightning moving through his brain, sudden and burning. He fell backward, his vision turning white, then black. He did not remember falling to the ground. When Arjun opened his eyes again, he was lying in the medical bay of the outpost. Rohan was sitting beside him, his face tired and worried. "You scared us," Rohan said. "We found you near that wreck, passed out. What happened?" Arjun tried to speak, but his head was pounding. He remembered the crystal, the light, the pain. He remembered a voice, or maybe many voices, speaking in a language that was not human, yet somehow he understood parts of it. Words like danger and weight and hidden echoed in his mind, though no one around him had spoken them. "I think I hit my head," Arjun said finally, deciding not to share the strange voices yet. He did not fully understand what happened, so how could he explain it to anyone else? The doctors checked him for injuries, but found nothing serious. Only a small burn mark on his palm, where the crystal had touched his skin. They told him to rest for a few days and sent him back to his room. That night, alone in his small quarters, Arjun could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard whispers, faint and distant, like a radio playing in another room. He could almost make out words, but they slipped away before he could understand them fully. 2 days later, life at the outpost slowly returned to normal. People stopped talking about the crash and went back to their daily work. Arjun tried to do the same, fixing machines and eating meals in the common hall, but something inside him had changed. He noticed things he had not noticed before. Sounds seemed sharper. Patterns and noise seemed to carry meaning, like there was a hidden structure hiding inside random sounds. He did not tell anyone about this. He was scared they would think he was losing his mind. Instead, he kept quiet and tried to focus on his work, hoping the strange feeling would fade with time. But deep down, he had a feeling that something important had happened to him at that crash site, something that would not simply go away. The whispers in his mind grew a little clearer each night, and though he could not understand full sentences yet, he began to recognize the shape of the language, like learning to hear music before understanding the words of a song. Far above the outpost, unseen by human eyes, a small dark ship moved silently through space, watching, waiting, and recording everything. The crash had not been an accident. It was the beginning of something much bigger, though no one on Rest Point 7 knew it yet. Arjun lay in his bed that night, staring at the ceiling, unaware that the crystal had given him a gift that very few humans would ever have. Somewhere far away, powerful beings who called themselves the dragon kind were preparing to make contact with humanity, fully believing that no human could ever understand their ancient and complex language. They were wrong. A week after the crash, the sky above Rest Point 7 changed forever. It started with a low humming sound that shook the windows of every dome. People ran outside, looking up, and what they saw made many of them freeze in fear. A massive ship, dark green and shaped like a folded wing, hung silently above the outpost. It was so large that it blocked out the light of the nearest sun, casting a long shadow across the rocky ground. Commander Rohan Varma called every worker into the main hall and ordered full lockdown. Weapons that had never been used before were pulled out of storage, though everyone knew they would do little against a ship of that size. Fear spread quickly through the outpost, but there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. A voice came through every communication device at once, deep and echoing, speaking in a language no human had ever heard. The sound was strange, filled with clicks, low growls, and sharp hissing tones that did not match any known human language pattern. The outpost's best translator machine tried to process it, but only broken words came out, confusing and incomplete. Arjun stood near the back of the crowd, his heart pounding, and something strange happened. As the alien voice continued, he realized he could understand it. Not perfectly, but enough to catch full sentences. The being was saying something about landing rights, about inspection, and about a warning not to resist. He grabbed Rohan's arm without thinking. "I understand what it's saying," Arjun whispered. Rohan turned to him, confused. "What do you mean you understand it? Nobody understands that language. Even the translator is failing." "I don't know how," Arjun said, "but I understand it. It's saying they are here to inspect our outpost. They are warning us not to fight back." Before Rohan could respond, a smaller shuttle broke away from the massive ship and landed just outside the outpost gates. The ground shook as the shuttle touched down, kicking up clouds of dust. A ramp lowered slowly, and out stepped a creature unlike anything the humans had ever imagined meeting. It walked on two strong legs, its body covered in dark green scales that shimmered slightly under the outpost lights. Its head was long, with sharp ridges running down to its neck, and its eyes glowed a faint yellow, cold and calculating. Wings, folded tightly against its back, twitched slightly as it moved, showing they were very much alive and functional. It was easily twice the height of an average human. This was Drazek, a commander of the dragon-kind fleet, a species that had been traveling the stars long before humans had even discovered fire. He walked forward with slow, confident steps, clearly used to being feared wherever he went. Rohan stepped forward to greet him, using the outpost's translator device, though the machine could only manage a few broken words in response. Drazek studied the humans with clear disinterest, his eyes moving across the crowd like he was looking at insects rather than people. He spoke again, longer this time, and the translator failed completely, giving only static and random beeping sounds. But Arjun understood every word. Drazek was telling his own soldiers, standing behind him, that the humans were primitive and weak, not worth much concern, and that this outpost would be easy to control once the larger invasion began. Arjun's blood went cold. He looked at Rohan, unsure whether to say anything in front of the alien commander. He decided to stay quiet for now, keeping his understanding a secret. Drazek finally spoke directly to the humans, his words slow and simple, clearly meant for creatures he considered far less intelligent than himself. He announced that this was an official visit to gather information about the outpost's resources and population. He warned that any act of aggression would result in immediate destruction of the entire base. Rohan agreed to allow the inspection, seeing no other choice. Drazek and a group of his soldiers walked through the outpost, scanning machines, storage rooms, and living quarters. The whole time, Drazek continued speaking casually to his soldiers in his own language, believing no human could understand a single word. He said things that made Arjun's skin crawl. He mentioned that human weapons were weak, human buildings were fragile, and that this species would make useful laborers once conquered. He even joked with another soldier about how humans looked strange, calling them soft-skinned creatures without any real defense. After the inspection, Drazek returned to his shuttle, warning that more of his kind would arrive soon to begin what he called the next phase. The shuttle rose into the sky and disappeared back into the massive ship above, which slowly moved away from the outpost, though it did not leave the system completely. Once the alien ship was gone, silence fell over Rest Point 7. People slowly came out of their hiding places, unsure if the danger was truly over. Rohan called Arjun into his private office immediately. "Tell me everything," Rohan said, closing the door behind them. "How do you understand their language? And what exactly did that thing say?" Arjun took a deep breath and explained everything, from the crystal at the crash site to the strange pain in his head, and finally to the whispers that had slowly turned into understanding. He told Rohan every word Drazek had spoken about the humans being weak and primitive, about the coming invasion, and about their true plans. Rohan sat back in his chair, his face pale but thoughtful. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "If this is true," Rohan finally said, "then you might be the only advantage we have. They think we're blind and deaf to their plans. As long as they believe that, we can prepare." Arjun nodded slowly, though fear still sat heavy in his chest. He had never wanted to be important. He had never wanted to be special. But now, whether he liked it or not, the fate of his entire outpost, and maybe more, rested partly on the strange power he had gained without asking for it. Outside, the stars continued to shine peacefully, hiding the storm that was slowly building far beyond human sight. 3 weeks passed after the first visit from the dragon kind, and Rest Point 7 had changed in ways no one could have imagined. What used to be a quiet mining outpost now buzzed with quiet tension. Every worker knew something big was coming, though only a small circle of people knew the real reason why. Rohan had chosen only a few trusted officers to know about Arjun's strange ability. Too many people knowing could risk the secret leaking out, and if the dragon kind ever discovered that a human could understand their language, they would kill Arjun without hesitation. Secrecy was now the outpost's greatest weapon. Arjun spent his days doing his normal mechanic work, fixing drills and machines, trying to act as normal as possible. But every few nights, he would sit in a small hidden room with Rohan and 2 other officers, listening carefully to recordings taken from hidden microphones planted near the areas where the dragon-kind soldiers often patrolled during their visits. At first, Arjun struggled to focus properly on the language. It was not like learning a new human language, where he could study grammar and words slowly. This understanding felt more instinctive, like a memory buried deep inside him that he had to pull out piece by piece. Some days the words came easily. Other days his head hurt so badly from concentrating that he had to stop and rest. The dragon-kind soldiers returned again and again over the following weeks, always claiming their visits were simple inspections. Drazek led most of these visits personally, walking through the outpost with the same cold confidence as before. He continued speaking freely in his own language, completely unaware that a simple mechanic standing nearby understood every insult and every secret he shared with his soldiers. During one visit, Arjun overheard something important. Drazek was talking to a younger soldier about the difficulty of controlling their own fleet properly. He complained that another commander, higher in rank than himself, often ignored proper procedures and made reckless decisions that put entire squads at risk. Drazek clearly disliked this other commander, though he spoke carefully, careful not to be too disrespectful in case someone reported his words. Arjun brought this information straight to Rohan that same night. "There's tension between their leaders," Arjun explained. "Drazek doesn't fully trust one of his superiors. If we can somehow use that, maybe we can create confusion among them." Rohan listened carefully, nodding slowly. "This could be useful. If their command structure has cracks, we might be able to widen them later, but we need more information before we can plan anything solid." Over the following days, Arjun continued gathering pieces of information from every conversation he overheard. He learned that a larger invasion fleet was preparing to arrive within a few months, meant to take control of not just Rest Point 7, but several other human outposts scattered across the region. He also learned that the dragon kind saw humans as a minor threat, useful only as future laborers once their world had been fully conquered. This information filled Arjun with anger, but also gave him a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, his actions actually mattered. He was no longer just a mechanic fixing broken drills. He was becoming something far more important, though the weight of that responsibility often kept him awake at night. One evening, during a routine inspection, something almost went wrong. Drazek was walking through the storage section when he suddenly stopped near Arjun, staring at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Arjun froze, trying his best to look calm and unaware, focusing his eyes downward like a nervous worker avoiding eye contact with a powerful stranger. Drazek turned to a nearby soldier and made a comment, almost too quiet to notice, wondering aloud if humans could truly be as simple as they appeared, or if they were hiding something beneath their soft exterior. It was not a direct accusation, more like a passing thought, but it sent a chill through Arjun's entire body. He understood every word, and it terrified him how close Drazek's suspicion had come to the truth. After the dragonkind left that day, Arjun immediately reported the comment to Rohan. "He's starting to wonder," Arjun said, his voice shaking slightly. "Nothing serious yet, but if we're not careful, he might start paying closer attention to me specifically." Rohan rubbed his temples, clearly stressed by the growing danger. "We need to be more careful from now on. No more direct listening sessions when their ships are nearby. We'll rely more on recorded conversations that you can review later, somewhere far from their scanners." The following weeks brought slow but steady progress. Using the information Arjun gathered, Rohan and his officers began preparing a hidden defense plan, quietly repositioning resources and strengthening weak points in the outpost structure, all while pretending everything remained completely normal on the surface. Arjun, meanwhile, began noticing something else about his new ability. It was not just limited to listening. Sometimes, when he focused hard enough, fragments of dragon-kind written symbols on their equipment also became understandable to him, though this skill was much weaker and required intense concentration to use even briefly. He experimented carefully, sneaking small notes about symbols he had glimpsed on discarded equipment left behind after inspections. Slowly, a rough map of the dragonkind's basic writing system began forming in his private notebook, something that could prove valuable in the future. Despite the growing danger, a strange kind of confidence started building inside Arjun. He was no longer simply reacting to fear. He was actively working, piece by piece, to protect his home and his people, using an ability that no other human had. He understood now that this power was not a curse, but a rare and precious tool, one that could change the outcome of an entire war if used wisely. Yet deep down, he also knew that Drazek's growing suspicion was a warning sign. Sooner or later, the dragonkind might realize the truth, and when that happened, there would be no more room for mistakes. The quiet outpost of Rest Point 7 continued its daily routines under the watchful eyes of the stars, unaware that within its walls, a single human was slowly becoming the most valuable secret weapon humanity had ever possessed. Rain fell softly over Rest Point 7's northern dome, a rare weather pattern created by the outpost's climate system to keep the underground water tanks filled. Arjun stood near a window, watching the drops slide down the thick glass, his mind far away from the quiet sound around him. 2 months had passed since the first dragonkind visit, and the outpost had changed from a place of fear into a place of quiet, careful preparation. Rohan had used every piece of information Arjun provided to slowly strengthen their defenses without drawing attention. Storage rooms had been secretly reinforced. Emergency escape tunnels had been dug beneath the domes, hidden under old equipment. Weapons that had been outdated for years were repaired and hidden in places the dragonkind had already inspected and marked as unimportant. But everything changed on the night Arjun overheard. It happened during a supply exchange visit, when several dragonkind officers gathered near their shuttle just outside the outpost gates. Arjun had been assigned to help load cargo, a job that placed him close enough to hear their conversation clearly, though the soldiers paid him no attention, seeing him as nothing more than a background worker. Drazek was present, speaking with 2 other commanders Arjun had never seen before. Their conversation started casually, discussing supply routes and minor complaints about outpost living conditions. But then the topic shifted, and Arjun's entire body went still. They were discussing the full invasion plan, The main Dragonkind fleet would arrive within 3 weeks, approaching from the far side of the system to avoid early detection by human scanners. Their first target would be Rest Point 7, followed quickly by 2 other nearby outposts. The plan included a specific weakness in the human scanning system, something the Dragonkind had discovered during their earlier inspections, which they planned to exploit to disable outpost defenses before the humans even knew they were under attack. Arjun forced himself to keep working, loading crates with shaking hands, terrified that any sudden movement might draw attention. He memorized every detail he could, repeating the numbers and directions silently in his mind until the conversation ended and the officers walked away. That night, Arjun rushed to Rohan's office, breathless and pale. "They're coming in 3 weeks," he said, closing the door quickly behind him. "The whole invasion. I know their route. I know their timing. I even know how they plan to disable our scanners before the attack starts." Rohan listened in stunned silence as Arjun explained everything in detail, drawing rough diagrams on paper to show the fleet's expected approach path. When Arjun finished, Rohan sat back, his face a mixture of fear and grim determination. "If this information is accurate," Rohan said slowly, "we finally have a real chance. We can't fight their fleet directly, but if we know exactly when and how they're coming, we can prepare a trap instead of waiting to be ambushed." Over the following days, Rohan gathered his most trusted officers and began building a full defense plan based on Arjun's information. They repaired the weak point in their scanning system quietly, without alerting anyone outside their small circle, and prepared a backup system that could activate the moment the Dragonkind attempted their planned attack. They also arranged for hidden weapon platforms to be placed exactly along the fleet's expected approach path, disguised as ordinary mining equipment. If the Dragonkind followed the route Arjun had overheard, they would fly directly into a prepared ambush without realizing it. But danger was growing closer for Arjun personally. During one of the final inspection visits before the planned invasion, Drazek approached him directly for the first time. Arjun's heart pounded as the massive Dragonkind commander stopped right in front of him, studying his face with those cold, glowing eyes. Drazek spoke slowly in his own language, testing him, saying something meant to insult him personally, calling him a weak and pathetic creature not worth the effort of conquering. It was clearly a trap, meant to see if Arjun would react in a way that suggested understanding. Arjun forced his face to remain blank and confused, tilting his head slightly, as if he had heard nothing but meaningless noise. Inside, his heart was racing so fast he feared Drazek might somehow hear it. After a long, tense moment, Drazek made a low sound, almost like a laugh, and turned away, seemingly satisfied that the human understood nothing. Once the Dragonkind shuttle left, Arjun collapsed onto a nearby crate, his whole body shaking from the stress of the encounter. Rohan found him there minutes later and helped him back to his quarters. "That was too close," Arjun admitted, his voice trembling. "He's definitely suspicious. If he tests me again like that, I don't know if I can keep hiding it." Rohan placed a hand on his shoulder firmly. "You held on today? That's all that matters. We're almost ready. Once the fleet arrives and falls into our trap, none of this will matter anymore. We just need a little more time." As the days moved closer to the planned invasion date, the entire outpost secretly prepared for the coming battle, all while maintaining a calm, normal appearance on the surface. Workers continued mining. Machines continued running. To any outside observer, Rest Point 7 looked exactly like the peaceful outpost it had always been. But beneath that calm surface, human resolve had quietly grown into something far stronger than the Dragonkind expected. Hidden weapons waited patiently along a path only the humans now knew about. A backup defense system stood ready to activate at exactly the right moment. And one nervous but determined mechanic held the key to it all, carrying inside his mind the entire invasion plan of a species that still believed humanity was blind, deaf, and completely unaware of what was coming. The rain outside Rest Point 7 finally stopped, leaving the sky clear and quiet, the same calm sky that would soon be filled with the fire of an approaching Dragonkind fleet, unknowingly walking straight into a trap built from secrets they never imagined a human could steal. The alarm did not sound like the usual outpost warning. It came in 3 sharp bursts, a signal only the highest officers had been told to expect. Arjun woke instantly, his heart already racing before his mind fully understood why. The fleet had arrived early, a full 2 days before the timeline he had overheard weeks earlier. He rushed out of his quarters, pulling on his jacket as he ran through the narrow hallways toward the command center. Around him, the outpost had transformed overnight from a quiet mining base into something closer to a fortress. Workers who had spent the last weeks secretly training now moved with quick, focused steps toward their assigned stations, carrying weapons that had been hidden for months. Inside the command center, Rohan stood in front of a large screen showing scattered points of light approaching from the far edge of the system, exactly along the path Arjun had described weeks earlier. The Dragonkind fleet was massive, far larger than anything the small outpost could face in a direct confrontation, but Rohan's plan had never been about direct confrontation. "They're early," Rohan said, his voice tense but controlled. "But they're following the same route. Our positions are still ready." Arjun took his place at a small station near the main communication system, wearing a headset connected to hidden microphones planted throughout the outpost and along the approach path. His job now was simple but critical: to listen carefully to every Dragonkind communication and translate it in real time for the humans preparing to fight. The first ships appeared on the outer scanners within the hour, moving in a tight formation exactly as expected. Arjun's headset crackled softly as Dragonkind pilots began speaking to each other, confirming their approach vectors and expected arrival times. He translated quickly, feeding the information directly to Rohan and the other officers. "They're splitting into 2 groups," Arjun said, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. "One group will move toward the eastern ridge. The other is heading straight for the main gate." Rohan immediately adjusted their defense formation, directing hidden weapon platforms to shift focus toward the eastern approach, exactly where the Dragonkind expected no resistance at all. As the fleet drew closer, Drazek's voice came through clearly, giving orders to his soldiers, confident and unaware of the trap waiting ahead. He spoke about how easily this outpost would fall, joking briefly with another officer about how simple this invasion would be compared to others he had led in the past. Arjun clenched his fists as he translated the words, anger mixing with fear inside his chest. He wanted nothing more than to prove Drazek completely wrong. The moment the first group of ships entered the ambush zone, the hidden weapon platforms activated at once, firing in perfect coordination guided by the exact information Arjun had gathered weeks earlier. Several smaller Dragonkind ships were destroyed instantly, catching the invaders completely off guard. Confused shouting filled Arjun's headset as pilots scrambled to understand what had gone wrong. "They didn't expect that at all," Arjun said quickly. "Drazek is furious. He's ordering the second group to change course immediately." Rohan responded instantly, redirecting a second wave of hidden defenses toward the new approach. In the middle of the chaos, Drazek's voice suddenly changed, sharp and suspicious. He ordered his soldiers to capture, rather than destroy, at least one human alive for questioning, convinced now that someone inside the outpost had betrayed critical information to the humans. Arjun's blood ran cold as he translated this order. If Drazek managed to capture anyone and discovered the truth about him, everything could fall apart in an instant. The battle raged for nearly 2 hours, both sides suffering losses, but the element of surprise combined with Arjun's constant real-time translations gave the humans a critical advantage. Slowly, the tide of battle began shifting. Dragonkind ships that expected easy victory found themselves outmaneuvered again and again by defenders who somehow always seemed to know exactly where to strike. Finally, with his fleet suffering heavier losses than expected and confusion spreading among his commanders, Drazek made a decision. He ordered a personal shuttle to land directly outside the outpost gates, intending to handle the situation himself, believing that a direct show of force would end the resistance quickly. Arjun watched through a security camera feed as Drazek stepped out onto the ground once again, this time with weapons drawn instead of the calm confidence he had shown during earlier inspections. He demanded, in his own language, that the human commander step forward immediately or face. Rohan turned to Arjun, his face pale but determined. "This is it. We need to end this now, one way or another." Arjun took a deep breath, stepping forward with Rohan toward the main entrance, his heart pounding with every step. As they walked out to face Drazek directly, Arjun realized that the moment he had feared for months had finally arrived. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending not to understand. The truth was about to be revealed, whether he was ready for it or not. Smoke drifted across the outpost gates as Arjun and Rohan stepped outside, the sound of distant explosions still echoing from the battle above. Drazek stood waiting near his shuttle, his scales scratched and dirty from the fighting, his eyes burning with anger and confusion. Behind him stood several armed soldiers, weapons raised, ready to act on his command. Drazek spoke first, his voice loud and harsh, demanding to know how a primitive species like humans had managed to predict his every move. He accused them of having some kind of hidden technology, some spy device planted among his own fleet. Rohan stood firm, though fear was clearly written across his face. He glanced sideways at Arjun, silently giving him permission to do what needed to be done. Arjun stepped forward, his legs shaking slightly, and spoke directly to Drazek in his own language for the very first time. The dragonkind commander froze completely, his eyes widening in genuine shock. The soldiers behind him exchanged confused glances, clearly stunned that a human could form words in their native tongue. "You called us weak," Arjun said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "You called us primitive. You spoke freely in front of us because you believed we could never understand you. That mistake is why your fleet is burning above us right now." Drazek's shock quickly turned into rage. He took a heavy step forward, his claws flexing at his sides, clearly considering violence. But Arjun continued speaking, his voice growing steadier with each word. "If you attack now," Arjun said, "you will lose everything you have left. I know your fleet's condition. I heard your officers reporting damage during the battle. Half of your remaining ships are barely functional. If this fight continues, you will not survive it, and neither will most of your soldiers." This was partly true and partly a bluff, but Arjun said it with such confidence that Drazek hesitated, clearly recalculating the situation in his mind. Drazek's soldiers waited nervously for his order, but he remained silent for a long moment, staring at Arjun with a mixture of anger and something new, something close to respect, though he would never openly admit it. Finally, Drazek lowered his weapon slightly, though his eyes remained sharp and calculating. "You are not what I expected," he admitted slowly. "None of your kind are." Rohan stepped forward carefully, seizing the opportunity. "We don't want endless war," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "But we will defend our home for as long as necessary. If you retreat now, we won't pursue your remaining ships. This can end here, today, without more unnecessary losses on either side." Drazek considered this for a long moment, glancing briefly toward the sky where the remains of his battered fleet continued to struggle against the outpost's hidden defenses. Pride fought with practicality inside him, but eventually, practicality won. He gave a sharp order to his soldiers, and they slowly lowered their weapons. Turning back to Arjun and Rohan, Drazek spoke one final time before returning to his shuttle. "This is not over between our people, but you have earned something today. Respect, perhaps, or maybe simply caution. Do not expect it to happen easily again." With that, Drazek boarded his shuttle and left, calling back the remaining ships of his fleet. Slowly, the battle above Rest Point 7 came to an end, the surviving dragon-kind ships retreating into the darkness of space, leaving behind wreckage and a stunned but victorious human outpost. In the days that followed, news of the battle spread quickly across human territory. What had happened at Rest Point 7 became the first real proof that humanity could stand against the dragon kind, not through greater strength, but through cleverness and information gathered. Months later, a small diplomatic meeting was arranged between human representatives and a dragon-kind envoy, a rare and cautious attempt to explore peace instead of endless conflict. To everyone's surprise, Drazek himself arrived as part of the dragon-kind delegation, no longer viewing humans as simple, primitive creatures unworthy of attention. He approached Arjun directly before the meeting began, studying him carefully with those same sharp, glowing eyes. "It seems your kind continues to surprise us," Drazek said, his tone far less hostile than before. "Perhaps there is more to learn from each other than either of us first believed." Arjun simply nodded, offering a small, respectful bow, a gesture he had learned meant acknowledgement among the dragon kind. The tension between them had not disappeared completely, but something new had begun to grow in its place, a fragile understanding built from unexpected respect. That night, standing alone outside the outpost, Arjun looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once seemed so distant and unimportant to him. He thought about how far he had come, from a simple mechanic fixing broken machines to someone whose actions had changed the course of an entire conflict between two very different species. He knew this was only the beginning. Other alien species were watching now, curious and cautious about humanity's unexpected strength. Many still underestimated humans, seeing them as young, weak, and easy to control. But Arjun understood something they did not. Humanity's greatest strength had never been physical power or advanced weapons. It had always been the ability to adapt, to learn, and to turn even the smallest, strangest advantage into something powerful. As he stood beneath the endless stars, Arjun smiled quietly to himself, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy would bring next, knowing that humanity's true journey among the stars had only just begun.